Welcome to the Two Sons podcast. Happy
Yeah.
Wednesday, everybody. I am getting ready to, literally in an hour and 9 minutes, head to the airport for Lake Tahoe. How are you, man? It's
I'm
to see
good,
you.
buddy. Dude, you're doing a lot of skiing.
Dude, I am doing a lot of skiing.
Yeah. So we did Flagstaff, last week?
Yep.
You're doing Lake Tahoe this week, and then the following week, or...
Yeah, so this trip I'm going on right now is like my wife's family's big trip every year.
Yeah.
And then we have our big trip every year. We do like a trip with just my wife and his wife usually to somewhere close, and then we'll do like a bigger trip with our bigger friend group to a place that's more of a destination. So we're going to
Breckenridge.
but then Carly, my wife, turns 30 this year, so we're going
That's
to
true.
Whistler. I'll be skiing in Canada for the first time
Wow.
ever. That's in mid-April though, so that's a little bit of a ways from here. We're going to be breaking down, what's that, episode 5?
Episode 5.
Episode
Bad
5
Batch,
of season 2 of Bad Batch today. Before we get started, though, I do have a little surprise question for you.
Oh.
So, Ewan McGregor,
Yeah,
Ewan
Ewan
McGregor did an interview today, or in the last week, where he was getting asked about Obi-Wan Kenobi, and he said that he basically, to paraphrase, he said that he basically had the time of his life playing that role again.
Sweet.
And that he really wants to do another season if they'll let him. So my question to you is, how do you feel about a potential season 2 of Obi-Wan Kenobi?
I'm 100% in. And I know that you have your doubts because we've talked about that, right? So I know that you... Well, don't let me put words in your mouth, but from what I understood, you were kind of under the impression like, hey, let's not draw this out too far. That storyline is a little bit more complete now. Let's just not create content to create content, right? Which is something that Disney has been guilty of. Like literally the sequels, episodes 7, 8, and 9 are literally that, where they're like, hey, Star Wars is a cash cow. Let's crank out episodes. It doesn't matter what's in them as long as it's Star Wars content. People will be happy. And then everyone's like, no, we weren't happy. So I know that they run the risk of creating garbage content, but I do think they could pull off a season 2, namely because Ewan McGregor was very much so involved in the development of that story, and I think he would consider it as sacred, like we do. And I think he'd take care of it.
And that's the important detail, is the sacred nature of it. Because, I mean, for the record, I understand and appreciate the business side of this kind of thing.
It can't exist if it's not making money. Right?
Exactly. Like, I have fans all the time that'll be like, we'll touch on a game and it'll be like this, some team like the Toronto Raptors.
Right.
And then I'll have comments like, man, I wish you'd talk about Toronto more and this kind of stuff. And it's like, I get that, I do, but they're 22 and 27. And they have a relatively small fan base compared to the rest of the league. And
they're an odd duck. They're literally outside of the country.
Exactly.
They're an odd duck team.
And they're an interesting basketball team. And I love talking about every single NBA team. I could do a show and enjoy my life if I just covered the Orlando Magic, just because that's how much I love the game of basketball.
Yeah,
but there are limitations in the business side of things there. But there's a flip side of it too, because I understand the whole clickbait thing where it's for instance, we do I would say a solid fourth of our content is centered around 2 NBA teams, the Warriors and the Lakers. But it's because those 2 fan bases combined are probably larger than the other 28 fan bases combined. It's that significant of a difference. So, but there is a delicate line. You got to know when you've milked it for all it's worth. So for instance, there was a point last year where the Lakers were so bad that it was hey, we gotta step away and focus on something
Sure.
and that's my thing. So I understand the whole hey, I understand why they did the first season of Obi-Wan.
Yeah.
It was wait. We know that Hayden Christensen's older, but he's playing a role of a guy who's basically mangled in fire in lava. So who cares if he looks older?
He should look old, yeah.
Yeah, and then maybe we can squeeze in one CGI scene where they're young and they're fighting, but
which I love. That scene was so sick, yeah.
But and we might have to rewatch Obi-Wan at some point.
I think we should.
But it was one of those things where they found a way to make it work. But if you remember, because it's so important fundamentally with how episode 4 starts, that he is living in relative obscurity on Tatooine and no one knows where he is.
Right.
And so what was cool about the original Obi-Wan season was they opened up the can of worms by bringing Obi-Wan back into the scene, having him fight Vader, having Vader and all the Inquisitors chasing him.
Right.
But then they tied off all the loose ends. Like Obi-Wan escapes. Vader is on the verge of death on this planet. The Inquisitor ship is already super far away because Vader took his own shuttle.
Right.
Like, it's tied off. Even the rogue Inquisitor is like turned to the light side or whatever the heck her deal is there at the end of that episode. So, like, it's one of those things where it's neatly tied off now.
It is.
And so to make a season 2, you have to untie all that stuff again.
Yeah.
And I thought they stick to the landing. Did you think they stuck the landing?
Oh, for sure. 100% they stuck the landing.
So now you have to stick a landing again. And it's delicate, and I don't think you can bring in Vader this time, right?
Again, that was one of the things that we were kind of weary of leading into the season was how do we have Obi-Wan and Vader come in contact with each other and only do it once, right? Because like you were talking about, Obi-Wan is like literally just sitting on Tatooine observing Luke Skywalker, and I think they probably would have a really good meeting, and if the directors and writers could come up with something that's like feasible, I think they'd obviously do it. But I really, really hope they don't just try and do it to do it. And I think hopefully we're leading into a new era of Star Wars. I think that episode 7, 8, and 9 was the epitome of people in charge of Star Wars, aka Kathleen Kennedy, not knowing what was going on, having directors that didn't know what was going on, and I think they suffered the consequences for it.
Okay, so you're saying you think they've learned their lesson.
I think they've learned their lesson. Dude, there is no major movie that's like on the horizon that we've seen. Like, right? Like, I think
taking a break from that.
They're taking a break from that, and that is...
There was supposed to be a Rogue Squadron movie last Christmas, and they scrapped it.
Yeah, and I think that they're being more delicate in the way that they're writing these, hopefully. So, I mean, obviously time will tell, but I have the utmost faith that if Ewan McGregor's involved in it, which he would be, that they do a good job. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I support all of that. It's just, I think the one last thing I would say, I think your take is interesting about them learning their lesson, because if that's the case, that alleviates a lot of my concerns about the coming years.
Right.
Here's the thing. I do think that you could have a season 2, but I think it'd have to be a little more niche in the sense that it couldn't involve Vader.
Oh, I see.
And what I mean by that is, like, it's pretty clear with the interactions that Vader and Obi-Wan have in A New Hope that there's been a good amount of distance between them.
Right.
So if there was like a saga of their interactions over the time between Mustafar and the Death Star, like where it's like, we fought twice, and then we also...
right.
And then season 2, we fought 2 more times.
When they see each other in the prequels, not the prequels, the original series, like they would act like they've seen each other where they didn't.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then also the way that the scene ends, and I'm not even sure what the name of the planet is where Obi-Wan delivered his second Eli Manning over Tom Brady victory. I'm not sure what the name of that planet was, but there was a moment where he basically, like at the end, says goodbye.
Right.
And they actually kind of tie off that whole storyline with the whole, like, your father is dead thing.
Right.
Which wasn't even mentioned in episode 3. And so it kind of like like that's why I say they stuck the landing. They really stuck the landing at the end of season 1. So I just think look, you know me, I'm always going to be down for some more Star Wars content.
Yeah.
If Obi-Wan season 2 comes out and I see a trailer, you and I are going to be here stoked about it, talking about
absolutely.
it. But I'm just going to have my reservations and concerns.
And as you should. I think we've had the luxury, I guess, of that. And I'm almost looking at it as like a good thing, because anytime they're like, hey, we're going to drop something new, Tales of the Jedi, Bad Batch season 2, Mandalorian, I'm always like, okay, like, all right, let's see how it looks. And then we get to be pleasantly surprised each time, right? So like there really hasn't been anything that atrocious other than episode 7, 8, and 9.
It's been almost all home runs other than that.
Yeah.
I mean, even these last 2 episodes of Bad Batch, which we're about to talk to, are complete filler episodes. Like, they're literally trailing a treasure hunter around.
Right.
Like, it's
Pirate
not...
treasure hunter.
Yeah, there's nothing important happening.
No.
But it's like I've enjoyed these episodes.
I have too.
They've
been really fun. I think definitely directed towards like the younger audience of Star Wars, right? It's a cartoon. I'm not against cartoons. I actually love them, but definitely felt like kids watching a TV show about treasure hunting, which is exactly what this episode was, right?
Yes, so but with the little mix-ins of violence and death, to teach our young kids about the realities of grown-up life,
right?
Just like
yes,
bizarre road rage incidents resulting in death.
Yeah, nothing comes easy in Star Wars. Nothing comes easy in that galaxy.
Little behind the scenes, we're sitting here at the desk, and Dallas, my boy Australian Shepherd, is literally sitting right between us underneath the desk, just staring up into both of our eyes.
He wants to play. He wants to play fetch.
Hey,
We're not playing fetch right now.
He's the most patient dog ever because he won't bother you or bark or whine or pot you. He'll just sit and stare at you in the eyes until you throw the ball.
Yeah, which is funny because last week when we were watching Bad Batch,
Jason's
sitting on his couch and Dallas drops the ball right in front of Jason. Jason picks it up, wings it across his living room, through the kitchen, and just smashes it off the kitchen island and just like destroys a bunch of stuff on the island, which was absolutely hilarious. At that point, Jason was like a little bit tired and he had a long work day though, so he didn't think it was that funny. But
oh man, we just moved into a new house and it's complicated because our previous place was easy to play fetch from the couch, but here it's like I've got to hit these like super narrow targets. So now I've discovered I can't put anything fragile on the kitchen counter. So this particular episode of Bad Batch, I thought kind of represented a bunch of specific things that I love about Star Wars.
Okay.
One, the mystery of ancient Star Wars galaxy lore.
Yeah.
Two,
galaxy's a big place.
There's kind of like this thing that happened in Star Wars, like, we are as a society in this like exponential increase of technology. Mm-hmm. So like just going back 10 years ago, how different things looked, or 20 years ago, how different things looked. Yeah. And, Star Wars kind of represents what would happen if like we got to the other end of that exponential thing and things leveled out. Because one of the things that happened in Star Wars is like 30,000 years ago when they invented hyperdrives and stuff like that, like technology kind of plateaued. And then so there's this kind of cool thing where it's like, oh yeah, we're talking about ancient history. Like this is this Sith war that took place X number of thousands of years ago, but it's like they still have hyperdrives, lightsabers, blasters, all this stuff, like shields, all like it's all the same technology.
And of course, cool. There's like the upgrading of so like original lightsabers we know from Legends, like you literally had to have like plugged into like a battery pack that you had to like lug around and stuff like that, like. And so like things are growing, but way slower than what you and I have seen. Like imagine what our society looked like just 150 years ago, right? It's insane to think about like what this land even looked like when like the land that we're sitting on, right? Like looked like, and it was just way different. And that's actually a really interesting concept. And it's actually, they're so at the peak, I feel like, that we actually see a downgrade of technology at some point, which is after
the collapse of the New Republic or Old Republic. Yeah.
Then you see, and this
is like a dark age kind of.
It's almost like a dark age, and this is probably more of like a product of the movies like literally coming out like years following. But like the technology from A New Hope looks completely different than the technology in like the prequels. But again, it is a little bit of a dark age, if you will, because the massive government that existed kind of tumbled down and a new one took over. And
it seems to me like the rest of the galaxy is in some variation of poverty.
Yeah,
as a result of it. It's a very like top 1% empire, bottom 99% everyone who's the oppressed. It's kind of like that kind of deal going on.
Which, not to get too literal, but like that's exactly why dictatorships like don't work, is because like you have to have healthy, functioning, successful citizens in order to have a healthy, functioning society. And
Star Wars straight up comes out and says that they're like oppression breeds rebellion. Like it's it's the whole manifesto thing from Andor. It's like when you oppress people, it just naturally leads to rebellion. It's just like it's like a reaction, a reflex.
Got nothing to live for. You guys killed my parents. I'm gonna kill you. Like that sort of vibe, right?
But this episode is really cool because I've jokingly calling it to Luke the giraffe of the Sith. But they go to this bombed out planet. And you find like essentially, and this is a recurring theme in Star Wars, and that's why I brought it up, because this particular giraffe of the Sith thing, which by the way we don't know if it's of the Sith, it's although reasonably we can assume that it probably was built by a dark side Force user.
It had
ancient
Sith
years
vibes.
ago. Yeah. Well, I mean, so there's between like the Starforge that the Rakata used, the mass shadow generator on Malachor that that Darth Revan used, and the dark giraffe of the Sith.
Every single time you say that, it's like the first time I've heard it. I think it's hilarious.
But every single one of these pieces of equipment is imbued with the Force,
right?
And that kind of gives it the ability to surpass normal technological limits. And so I would say it's pretty safe to assume that Giraffe of the Sith was actually powered by the Force in some way, shape, or form.
I think so too.
So, but to be clear, we don't know if there's any sort of specific Force connection. They actually say the treasure hunter lady says it predates the Jedi.
Yeah. The only thing that was interesting though is that Heart of the Mountain stone, right? It was Kyber crystal-esque,
yes,
in a lot of ways,
but it also melted. Remember that?
And it melted. That's what I was going to bring up. So we've seen Kyber crystals explode. I don't know if off the top of my head I've seen a Kyber crystal melt. So I wonder what that technology was, because like a Kyber crystal, obviously that stone contained a lot of energy.
Yes.
I think it was more than just a key that turned things on and off. I think it definitely was harboring a crap ton of energy.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think because it kind of when they plugged it back into the machine, like there was clearly a flow of energy into it, which led to it melting.
Right.
And who knows? Like I'm sure that there's the storyboard people, even though it's not in the episode, had some sort of idea of what that was working like something along the lines of like, oh, when it was originally put in, there were Force users there that were keeping its structural integrity so that it would calm the machine down.
Probably,
or something.
Or they knew how to like drive it.
But essentially, it destroyed the machine just fell and died.
It essentially, it kind of destroyed itself. It very much so reminded me of an unkept machine that was extremely powerful that kind of just ran itself into the ground and couldn't handle even being shut off. Like that's how ancient it was, right? Like I'm sure at one point you could turn it on and off and have it not be a big deal, but this was an ancient machine, thousands of years old, and it literally couldn't handle being turned on and off, which makes sense. I mean, that makes sense in my brain. What did you think of that monster that existed that attacked Wrecker?
Oh gosh,
that thing was sick.
Yeah, it kind of reminded me of like my brain went to the Clone Wars Geonosis Coliseum scene.
Dude, that's exactly where I was going.
A combination of the one that attacked Obi-Wan and the one that attacked Padme, like a kind of like big mantis kind of vibe, like mixed with like a small, quick like cat kind of vibe.
That thing was fast.
Yeah, it was.
And it's funny because Jason and I watched the episode this morning together, and there's certain instances where we try really hard not to talk about what's going through our heads just so we can save it for the pod. And I had Geonosis vibes the entire episode.
Really?
The small tunnels that they were traversing through, the praying mantis looking monster. The entire time I was thinking Geonosis.
And it's very possible that the Force users or whoever it was, the original population of this decimated planet were some sort of insectoid species because they lived in tunnels and things like that.
Maybe so. But and I'm curious to know what happened to that planet, right? Like I wonder if there was just a massive war that existed on it and that was just the remnant of one of their war vehicles. Long story short, though, this episode was good. Definitely a filler episode, though.
Yeah, and I said that to Luke while we were watching it. I was like, "There's only so long they can have these people just tail the treasure hunter around. Eventually, they got to do something impactful." Yeah. But Clone Wars has like I'm sure this season will have close to 20 episodes, and that's kind of the natural order of the way Clone Wars works. And one of the things I've noticed with Clone Wars and Rebels over the years is it's like story arcs, and they're clearly in this treasure hunting arc. Yeah. Each arc usually lasts like 2 or 3 episodes, but then you'll enter into something really important for like a 2 or 3 episode arc. You know what I mean? So that's what I'm guessing.
Yeah, I think we're leading into an important episode. If it's not this next episode, I think it's going to be the following. They did hint that they were going to be like looking for another treasure at the end of this episode, and I think that was more of like a way to like tie up the loose ends, just to show Omega's interest in like just youthfulness and like, oh my gosh, like
exploring.
We're gonna explore and become treasure hunters, and I think that's probably the only thing that like last little scene was there to function as. I don't think they're actually going to do another treasure hunting episode, but we will see. there's one phenomenon that kind of exists in Star Wars, and if that giant praying mantis thing would have been in like one of the movies, I think I would have been rolling my eyes at it. I would have been like, oh my gosh, this is so over the top and ridiculous. This is stupid. But because it was in like a satellite type genre of
Wars,
like Clone Wars or Bad Batch, I think like it was a little bit over the top, but I'm cool with it just because it was like in one of their cartoons, and like that was like a way more palatable way to consume that type of content than if it was like in the movie.
Yeah, it's like an absurdity license. You can go a little bit more it's kind of like the whole Omega with her like bow and arrow thing.
Right.
Like at a certain point, like I'd be like, can someone just give me a damn blaster?
Right,
You know, like I'm
right.
not sick of carrying this giant thing around.
Right.
Like, and like my arm's getting tired. Like,
Right.
but it's a cartoon, so you're just kind of. But which, by the way, I was kind of weirded out by the Omega character in the first season. I didn't understand the purpose, but like she's growing on me.
Is she?
And,
Cool.
Yeah, and I just I'm at least in like I consider her to be like a realistic Star Wars character now.
Great.
In a way that I didn't early on, just because I didn't really understand. But
Cool.
but yeah, I'm enjoying it. Again, I'm ready for them to get to some serious stuff, but I'm enjoying it. And at least we have other storylines that we can discuss in the meantime. So.
Yeah, man. Mandalorian's coming up very soon.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm pretty stoked about that. And actually, we're going to have Star Wars Overload when Bad Batch and Mandalorian start to intersect each other a little bit in March.
It'll be good for us.
Yep.
All right, guys. That is all we have for today. As always, we sincerely appreciate your support, and we will see you next week.
Thanks a lot.